Alright, on my way to my first paint competition, local shop, the 2-hour speed paint, painting a Stormcast Eternal. Try to do it 2 hours. I think we're gonna go with an orange and black and white scheme, or white and red maybe. Oh shoot, bunch of water dripping everywhere. Oh man. All right, we're gonna head on in there and see what's going on. Just give them a quick shout out, get some of this on videotape. Wish me luck. I entered Vorpal Gaming and got my gear out. I received my model. I was sitting with some fellow painters as we all got prepared, and before long, the clock was ticking. And after 2 hours, I managed to get second place. But I had to know. I had to know if I could do better. Alright, first, let's have a look at the original model. I wanted to somehow work in highlights to the black armor and get better highlights overall. Vorpal Gaming was kind enough to let me have one of the spare models. So, this is my attempt to do better. Okay, I'm going to go over the colors. These are the same colors I used in the competition. We have Army Painter's Rune Wars line, Dragon Red, and Leather Brown. Vallejo's Game Color line, Arctic White, Orange Fire, Pale Flesh, Wolf Gray, and Black. Vallejo's Model Color line, Gloss White, and lastly, some special paints by Turbo Dork. Red Rum, a metallic sparkly red, and Pearly Gates, a pearlescent color. Turbo Dork has some amazing looking metallics in any color, and their Turbo Shift line is their color changing colors. I hope to get my hands on some more of these at some point. Oops, I almost forgot. We have GW Citadel, Fire Dragon Bright, and Lead Belcher. Okay, so my first step is to get set up before the clock is running. So I got some paints on my wet palette. We have a simple plan this time. Base coat the black parts in black, then base coat the white parts in wolf gray, then finally base coat the orange parts in orange. I also plan on getting paint on the base as I use the colors. After that, I plan on going to the brown parts, the leather, the belt, the weapon handle, and then we'll go back and start working on the highlights for the previous colors. Then we'll get into the accents, like the small jewelry and the symbols and things like that. And then finally we'll get to the final highlights. I also plan on doing the touch-ups in between each step, and this time we'll try to paint this paint scheme and we'll try to do a little better. Get the clock started and get to work on the first base coats of black. I'm being a little bit careful to not get the black paint on other parts, mainly because the model was primed in a white, and I'll be working with white paint later on, and I don't want to have to use several layers to get a smooth coat of white. I've only got 2 hours, so It's good to consider things like this when you're speed painting. You will notice that it's a bit tough to reach some of the areas on a fully assembled model. This is why I prefer to paint in sub-assemblies, but this is a speed paint, so we just power it on. I'll get these coats going and then switch over to a time lapse and we'll paint us a mini. Now, onto the wolf gray base coat. I am using wolf gray because it is a darker shade than the white, and when I go back in with the white later, the darker base will have left a lot of the shading in place. And once again, I'm just trying to be as neat as possible and not get the brighter gray on the black parts we just painted. This will help save time later on with touch-ups. Alright, on to the final base coat of orange. I'm doing this base coat the same as the previous base coats. I chose the color orange because it's my favorite color and it looks pretty good along with black. I came up with this color scheme about 20 minutes before I left to go to the contest that day. I kind of like it, so this is what we have, and we're going with it. It's time to get started on color blocking in the brown. We're going to hit the brown parts like the belt and the pouches, and later we'll get the handle and whatever else we find. I'm just going to be getting a base color on, and the plan is to go over most of the model with a black wash, and that'll look pretty good over a coat of brown. To start the white highlights over the wolf gray, I used the Arctic white. I just put a drop of it down on the wet palette, then I thinned it down with a drop or two of water. I'm only going to be applying this paint to the raised areas of the white cloth and then to the edges of the white armor plates. Having the paint thinned down a little bit is going to help blend the colors for when I go in with the final highlights. It should all match in a gradient. On to the black highlights. For this, I mixed a small amount of wolf gray into the black for a lighter shade of black. I then applied the paint to all the areas, well, basically all the areas of the black armor that I thought would be reflecting the light, I had completely guessed at this, and I do plan to learn more about properly highlighting metal and highlights in general. Here I'm simply going in and just doing a little touch-ups with the colors I had on the palette and then moving forward from there. At this point I've pretty much abandoned the plan, and we're just frantically working in highlights. So somehow I had lost or overlooked the footage of the orange highlights, but I did them in a similar fashion as the other highlights. So as the timer got closer to the half-hour mark, I began placing more highlights using the gloss white for the white cloth and a glaze of my dark gray mix on the black parts. I also tried to touch up anything I could find depending on the color I had loaded onto my brush. As I moved forward, I decided that it was time for a wash. So I mixed up a black wash, 50-50 paint to water. I was very nervous that this wash would ruin things, but I stuck to my idea and went ahead and applied the wash over the entire model. After the wash had dried, I then painted all the jewelry and the head of the weapon in the lead belcher, kind of a silver paint, and I just moved on. I was getting pretty short on time. Gonna get our turbo dork on. So, armed with my pearly gates by turbo dork, I began to apply a smooth coat over the entirety of the white cloth. I mainly chose to do this because after a black wash, I needed to quickly clean up the cloth. The transparency and the shininess of this paint worked well for that. It sort of blended in all the shades and kind of unmuddled everything, made it look alright. So I accepted that, and once again I powered forward. So while the turbo dork was drying up on the white cloth, I went ahead and touched up some of the smaller details the best that I could with the time that I had. Things like these little rivets on his shoulder and just anything that I could find that needed to stand out a little more. More turbo dork time. I had previously base coated this little crystal in the dragon red, and now I'm applying the red rum by turbo dork to this little crystal on his belt, as well as putting a little bit of it in the little eye sockets of his helmet, just to add a little pizzazz to it. So, as the time was dwindling down to the end, I began to focus in on the final highlights, last bits of touch-ups, and the symbols. I will admit that I did feel a fair bit of pressure, but I also learned along the way, and a few things I learned is that the next time I do a speed paint, to have a full plan and to follow it fully. Also to make better use of the colors I have loaded onto the brush at the current moment, as well having all the colors that I'm going to use laid out on the wet palette beforehand, not just the starting base coats. But all in all, did I do better? I'll let you decide, because, well, we're out of time and the model's finished for now. I do plan to revisit them both and see what else can I do to add quality to an existing paint job. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my reattempt of a 2-hour speed paint Stormcast Eternal. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, like, comment below, hit that bell if you want notifications, and I would also like to make a short announcement that I have launched a Patreon page if you'd like to support me further and help this channel grow and help me and my family out at the same time. So, thank you, God bless, take care, and I will see you next time.